So today we're going to look at the double line graph. In a video a few weeks ago, we actually looked at the line graph itself. You'll see here, one of the things we focused on with line graphs is the fact that when you do line graphs, you want to start with the beginning at the top and with the end point at the bottom. When you're working with them, you'll notice, of course, one of the things here with lines is you don't necessarily have the vertical lines down. There's some ways to fix that, which we'll kind of look at. But the one thing about these that are perfect, and the reason why I love using line graphs, is because we're talking about over time. So with a double line graph, we're analyzing two similar pieces of data over time, which allows us to visualize the differences, and then that allows us to question what causes these differences. Because we can look at these numbers right here all day long, but they don't really tell us how far apart they is. Getting that visual helps us to do so. So the key to the double line graph is that data over time must be comparable. In other words, apples to apples, not apples to oranges. So, give you an example. When we look at this, we're comparing real GDP to nominal GDP. So real GDP is based on constant prices, nominal GDP is based on current prices. So we're looking at two forms of GDP over the exact same time period using different dollar amounts. So these are comparable to us. On the other hand, we could not compare, say, real GDP to a budget deficit because those are two different things. Even if we did them over the same time period, there's not any way for us to really compare those two terms. So to do this, what we do is we highlight all three columns with our year, nominal, and then real GDP. We're going to go to Insert. We'll go down here. Oh, pick the wrong graph. Here we go. We're going to go over here, and we're going to choose this one over here that has our data points, the dots. Help us to visualize our years a little better. So let's make this nice and big. And then let's clean this up by going in and enlarging it, making it black and bolding it. That way we can see a lot better. One of the things I'm also going to do, I'm going to double click here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the minimum on this to $1 billion instead of $2 billion. We'll change our nominal here. And then the other thing I want to do with that is I actually want to move the legend to the top up here. Now, the reason why I chose the bubble specifically is because you'll notice the years now are looking like this. And because of where we're at, this allows us to then look at our lines going down. Our chart title, we're going to make this a little bigger, bold. Now what we're going to do with our chart title is this is going to be nominal versus real GDP. And we're going to give our time period, which is 1982. Do dash 2002. And then we're going to give our amount, which is in billions. So now we have our chart. Now a couple of things we want to look at here. When you're looking at this, you'll notice we see here with our real GDP up until 1992, right here, real GDP is fallen below nominal. Whereas after that, real GDP is above nominal. So one of the first things we would want to know is why. Well, when we look at the difference between real and nominal, real GDP should be below nominal. The reason why is because nominal is based on current, whereas real is constant. And so the difference between these two, this area here, is inflation. One of the cool things we can do is we can come in here and we can insert, when we're messing with stuff, is right here, we can go in and insert a shape. So we can take this shape right here and we can actually kind of work across these lines. And going point by point. Shape fill. So what I can do here is I can say, for example, this area here in red is inflation. Now the reason why we have inflation on this end but we don't on this end is because on this end, beginning in 1992, we're using 1992 prices. Well, what this shows us here is that based on 1992 prices, we were producing less. So this is what we would expect, is to see that this is below. If this were actually to go above here, we would be in real trouble. So in this graph, what we really want to focus on is this end here. We want to focus on looking at this. Now, one of the cool things that I love doing is we can come in here to this filter, and we can uncheck everything, and we can start with 1992, which is the base year for real GDP, and we can work backwards and pull that up. Now, when we look at this, here's what this is going to tell us. You'll notice that right here in 1982, so 4.5 billion and then 3.3 billion. In other words, this was the amount of inflation between what we actually were paying for stuff versus what it was really worth. So when we start looking at that and we work up towards right here in 1992, of course, where they're the same point based on dollar values, we get a really clear, good idea of what's happening. Now we'll notice here that production is increasing. And here's inflation. So the nice thing here is what we see is that inflation, if you'll notice, is starting to kind of, it's not as steep, it's starting to level off. So we can start to answer a lot of questions by doing this and by using our filters. But this allows us to compare data points over time, and it allows us to visualize this without thinking about these dollar amounts themselves. We can just get a good idea of what's happening over a time period. So that's why I like these double line graphs.